Week 5 of the college football season is here. We are previewing and predicting the SEC slate. Welcome in to Overtime with Matt Moscona. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. I'm the host of After Further Review on ESPN radio stations throughout Louisiana, the host of the Locked on LSU podcast, and the publisher at louisianasports.net. Thanks so much for finding the channel. We will get to previews and predictions of all 8 games involving SEC teams here in Week 5 as we're moving toward the best month in the entire sports calendar, October, where you talk about conference races in full swing. The NFL has kicked off. The NBA tips off. College basketball is nearing, of course, Major League Baseball postseason. October is the greatest month on the sports calendar, and we're 1 week away from it. But the issue at hand here for the SEC, sort of separating which teams are actually going to be playoff contenders by the time we get to the end of October. Let's start with a non-conference matchup, maybe the biggest non-conference matchup on the slate. Notre Dame is at Arkansas, and the real question is how much longer can Sam Pittman last? After blowing an 18-point lead at Memphis, you saw what the Arkansas defense is. This is an Arkansas defense that also gave up 45 points in a road game at Ole Miss. Arkansas is just 2-2 on the season. Notre Dame only 1-2, but heartbreaking losses against good teams. They lost at Miami. They lost to Texas A&M. They had a rare open date early in the season after that loss to Miami, but the heartbreaking loss to A&M, they bounced back with a 50-burger against Purdue, 56-30 a week ago. The Notre Dame offense proved they can certainly get going. And while Taylor Green is outstanding, and I don't know that Notre Dame's defense is what it was a year ago. You can't just have that senior-laden squad lose all those players and not expect to miss a beat. I think Notre Dame goes on the road to Fayetteville and gets that win against Arkansas. I like them to win and to cover as bad gets worse for Sam Pittman. With Utah State traveling to Nashville to take on Vanderbilt, part of me looks at Vanderbilt as a 23.5-point favorite and thinks, my God, how bad is Utah State if they're a 23.5-point underdog to Vanderbilt? But then you look and you realize Vanderbilt ain't what we thought of Vanderbilt for the entirety of their existence. They're 4-0. Of course, they put up 70 points a week ago in a get-right game against Georgia State, who beat them last year in Atlanta. But Vanderbilt's 4-0. They'll beat Utah State to move to 5-0, and they'll be one game short of bowl eligibility. But it's not going to take us long to figure out just how good Vanderbilt really is, because after Utah State, they get Alabama, LSU, Missouri, Texas, 4 straight ranked opponents for the Commodores after this last layup against Utah State. That 5th win for bowl eligibility may have to wait until Kentucky in the penultimate game of the regular season, but Vandy and Vandy big at home against Utah State. Auburn at Texas A&M is fascinating. This one, remember, a year ago went to 4 overtimes there at Jordan-Hare with Hugh Freeze getting to what is, at this point, the only ranked win of his tenure at Auburn. He's 1-9 against ranked opponents at Auburn. The only win, of course, the overtime game a year ago where Texas A&M dropped the tying 2-point conversion, which allowed Auburn to go on and win that football game. This one, for me, is all about the spot on the schedule for Auburn and for Texas A&M. Remember, Texas A&M had that dramatic win against Notre Dame where they had the late rally. Well, they got an open date after that. So they had a chance to kick up their feet and rest. Meanwhile, Auburn just went and played a slobber knocker at Oklahoma a week ago where they got their heart broken by a couple of terrible calls. And oh, by the way, we also saw Auburn give up 10 sacks against Oklahoma a week ago. Going on the road back-to-back in conference is something that I always look at a marker in schedule. It is very difficult for any team in the conference to play back-to-back road conference games. Auburn has to do it now at Oklahoma a week ago. This week at Texas A&M. I like Texas A&M, and I like Texas A&M big at Kyle Field against Auburn. Tennessee at Mississippi State, I think, is the sneaky good game on the calendar this week. Maybe you haven't been paying attention to the Bulldogs, and I don't blame you if you haven't. But Vegas set their win total this year over-under at 3.5. They're already 4-0, and I get it. 3 of their wins have come against Southern Miss, Alcorn State, and Northern Illinois. They also had the dramatic win, the 24-20 win over then 12th-ranked Arizona State. But they're at 4 wins already, and Jeff Lebby is building a culture there where they're good on offense. Blake Shapen is hitting his stride, and they're certainly a manageable team. Now, the defensive numbers look really impressive right now for Mississippi State. They've only allowed 11.8 points per game, which is 16th in the country. This is Mississippi State, 16th in the country in scoring defense. But They did play Southern Miss, Alcorn State, and Northern Illinois, which can skew those statistics. This is a completely different level of challenge, but I think they have buy-in. I think you're going to have a great environment in Starkville at Davis Wade Stadium for that game on Saturday at 3:15 Central Time on the SEC Network. The Vols are a 7.5-point favorite, and they did have an opportunity, Tennessee did last week, to beat up on UAB after their heartbreaking loss against Georgia. And I think the fact that they came out against UAB, were not sluggish, did what they were supposed to do, shows that this team is on the right track. Tennessee's the better team, and I think they win this football game. But you can interest me in 7.5 with Mississippi State there at Davis Wade Stadium, which should be a raucous environment on Saturday afternoon. The sleeper on the schedule is Missouri, who plays UMass there in Como. But for Missouri, remember, they're 4-0. This is their fifth game. They'll move to 5-0. They've played this will be 5 consecutive weeks playing at home. It's about to get real for Missouri, however, after UMass, because they'll play Alabama at home, and then they go at Auburn, at Vandy, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, at Oklahoma, at Arkansas. Look, Drink fancies themselves as a legitimate team, as a contender. I don't buy it. Bo Prabula's put up huge stats, but when you look at who they've played, that can't be ignored. Central Arkansas, Kansas, UL Lafayette, South Carolina, who's no good. By the way, I told you that before the season started. Picked them at 7-5. I might have been too generous. And now they're going to play UMass. I'm not impressed by anything Mizzou has done until they go on the road and challenge themselves, and those challenges are coming in conference play. South Carolina, speaking of which, is at home against Kentucky. Now, South Carolina has had one of the more disappointing starts to the season. A team that many thought was a preseason top 10 team and a playoff contender. I did not. I picked them 7-5. The media in the Southeastern Conference picked Lenore Sellers, preseason all-conference SEC quarterback. I did not. I laughed at that. Couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat for half of last year. I think he's a fantastic runner, a good physical athlete. He makes some wild plays. He is not a great quarterback as of yet. He may be, but he is certainly not that yet. He's not capable of willing this team to wins. And they won a lot last year because of that outstanding defense, a defense of which they lost Kyle Kennard and Nick Emenwari and Tonka Hemingway, a lot of those guys to the NFL. So I think South Carolina is a very average at best football team. They're 2-2. They're 0-2 in the conference. They better get this win at home against Kentucky, because when you look at what's ahead for South Carolina, this tells the story. After Kentucky, they play at LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M. 5 straight conference games against ranked opponents before they play Coastal Carolina and Clemson at home to wrap up the season. 5 straight conference games against ranked opponents, 3 on the road, and the 2 home games are against Oklahoma and Alabama. South Carolina will be lucky at this point if they get to the 7-5 that I predicted. But if they want to get their first conference win, they better get it Saturday against Kentucky. The marquee game on the entire college football slate is Alabama at Georgia. This is a series that, as we well know, as Georgia has been the dominant team in college football of the last half decade, taking that mantle from Alabama, winning back-to-back national championships, and really being an upset away from what we thought would get in the SEC championship game to Alabama, of what should have been back-to-back national championships. The one thing they haven't been able to solve, really, is Alabama. The game a year ago in Tuscaloosa was a thriller. Bama got up big. They choked away the lead. Georgia took the lead in the second half. Then Ryan Williams made the acrobatic touchdown reception to save Alabama from one of the most embarrassing losses in the history of that program. I think Kirby Smart's team obviously is still very young. It's something Kirby talked about at SEC Media Days in July, the youngest roster he's ever had at Georgia. I'm still not completely sold on Gunnar Stockton as the guy to lead Georgia to a championship, but Georgia getting down against Tennessee and finding a way back to win it, and probably as they did, was super impressive. This is more about Alabama not being an elite football team anymore. I know there are people who like the talent that Alabama has, and they do have some skilled talent. But at the line of scrimmage, Alabama was pushed around by Florida State, and you cannot forget that. I am not impressed by a win over ULM and a terrible Wisconsin team. There was no get right. This is 2 weeks for both of these teams to get ready for this game, and I would ask you this question. Which coach do you think would do more with 2 weeks to get ready? Kirby Smart at home or Kalen DeBoer going on the road? Georgia will win this game. They will dominate both lines of scrimmage against Alabama. I don't care that Tim Keenan's back. I don't care that Jan Miller is back. This is Georgia all day long against Alabama. I think they smoke the Crimson Tide, and a very humbling reminder for Alabama of where they actually fall in the grand scheme in their lot in college football today. Now, the team I cover on a day-to-day basis is the LSU Tigers, and they take on the Ole Miss Rebels. This will be a 2:30 Central Time game. Of course, I'll give my pick on my radio show and a lot of other places, but I'll give it here as well because, quite honestly, I'm prepared to give a pick on this game. I am irrationally confident that LSU is not only going to win this game, but they're going to win it comfortably. I think so many people, odds makers, fans alike, prognosticators, people who cover college football, are continuing to look at LSU through an historical prism under Brian Kelly. I've heard all this week about LSU's inability to slow running quarterbacks a year ago, and that's true. But this LSU team is nothing on the defensive side like they were a year ago. It's the thing that I've been preaching ever since SEC Media Days, really since before that in the spring, is the fact that LSU went out and spent $18 million to buy the best transfer portal class of elite defensive players at every level of the defense. These are all one-year mercenaries, and they're going to be gone after this year. And LSU may not be a great team next year. They may take a dramatic step back with all of these guys gone. But if you need an example of what it should look like, look at Ole Miss. Ole Miss did the same thing a year ago. They went in the portal behind a fifth-year senior quarterback in Jackson Dart. They bought arguably the best roster in the country alongside Ohio State, and they lost 3 games. Why did they lose 3 games? Not because of the talent, because Lane Kiffin gagged away 3 games they had no business losing. They choked at home against Kentucky. They blew a game where they were a 3.5-point favorite against LSU in Baton Rouge and lost as a double-digit favorite at Florida in November. Ole Miss should have been a playoff team a year ago. They weren't because of their coaching. Now Brian Kelly is the one with the loaded deck, bringing this roster into Oxford. The home team has won the last 5 in this series, but I'm here to tell you the historical significance of this series is totally irrelevant because this is a completely different team than any Brian Kelly has had in his time at LSU because of that defense. You cannot convince me that Trinidad Chambliss, coming from Division II, playing Arkansas, who is an atrocious defensive team, and Tulane will have shown him anything like what he's going to see. Blake Baker also now has 2 weeks to prepare of game film to prepare for Trinidad Chambliss or a hobbled Austin Simmons. I think LSU's defense suffocates Ole Miss's offense and announces to the collective college football world just how good this defense is, like I've been saying since the spring. I have eyes. I've put eyes on them since spring and in fall camp. This is an elite level defense at every level. I fully expect Whit Weeks, Harold Perkins to spy Chambliss or Simmons, whoever's in at quarterback, make them win throwing the football, and they are just not going to be able to do it because LSU has lockdown corners and they have elite level safety play. If you need to look at the contradiction, just look at the safeties. A year ago, Sage Ryan was a starting safety at LSU in one of the worst secondaries I've ever seen, certainly the worst safety play I've ever seen at LSU. Sage Ryan entered the transfer portal. He's now at Ole Miss. LSU brought in A.J. Halsey and Tamarcus Cooley from the transfer portal, and LSU safety play has been outstanding so far through the first month of the season. I do not think Ole Miss will be able to get much of anything going offensively, just like Cade Klubnik, a fifth-year senior with a veteran offensive line and 2 all-conference wide receivers, only put together 1 sustained drive against LSU the entire game in the opener at Clemson, South Carolina. I think LSU's defense is the story. And oh, by the way, that Ole Miss defense is pedestrian at best. I watched that Ole Miss team get into an absolute quagmire at Kentucky and struggle with a terrible Kentucky team. And I watched Ole Miss on their home field give up 500 yards to Arkansas. Garrett Nussmeier, all the skill LSU has offensively. Ole Miss dead last in the SEC in rushing defense. That is a terrible Ole Miss defense. LSU has skill everywhere. The Tigers are going to be primed for this one, and the LSU defense is the difference. I think LSU wins and wins this game comfortably. I'm picking LSU 31-17, and it probably won't even feel that close. Okay, there's my predictions through the SEC slate this weekend in Week 5. Drop your comments below. Let me know your thoughts. If you're new, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate you for being here on another episode of Overtime with Matt Moscona.